Hello, everyone. Welcome to Defrosted Chicken. My name is Natalie Calderon, and I'm going to be your host. Alrighty, friends. Welcome to episode 3. Before we get started on episode 3, full disclosure, I am having a freaking day. I'm exhausted. My baby woke me up super early. I went to bed super late last night. So it's one of those mom days where you just don't want to be a mom. You don't want to be a wife. Everything your kids are doing and your husband is doing is just pissing you off. So I decided to have a little cry. I'm out in my car right now, I'm having a moment to myself, and I decided to just do the recording right now because why the fuck not? Let's get started. This week's topic is, what is something your parents did that you would not do with your kids? Okay, I went ahead and asked a bunch of people that I know this question, and I'm going to go ahead and read some of those responses with you guys. Also, I'm going to be telling you my response. But before that, I want to share something with you guys. I want to let you guys know that no matter what you do, you're going to fuck up your kids. Just keep that in mind, okay? Because as I'm doing some research online, I came to the conclusion that people are just looking for shit to be mad about, and they're looking for traumas. Because some of the stuff I read was ridiculous. And I'm going to share one with you guys because I actually found it kind of funny. And this person said that the one thing that they wouldn't do to their kids that their parents did with them was tell them to be careful all the time. This person said, my mom told me to be careful all the time growing up, and now I'm scared to do things. Now, if that is the one thing that is haunting you from your childhood, you had a good childhood. You're fucking reaching right now. You're trying to find shit. So, anywho, those are not the type of things we're going to be talking about today. I want to talk about the real shit, the drama, the trauma, the stuff that stuck with you all the way up until adulthood. Okay? So, let's get started. Now, I actually have several things that I could name, but I'm only going to pick one. And the one thing that I'm picking is something that I know I stick to no matter what, and that is apologizing to my kids. I think it's really important for me to apologize to my children when I'm wrong. I need them to know that I'm sorry, that I was wrong, that they were right, or whatever the case is. They need to know. And you might be thinking, like, what's the big deal? Well, here's the thing that has stuck with me my whole life because we would get in trouble a lot as kids. And, well, my sister and I, we would get, yelled at, we'd get hit pretty bad. Sometimes it wasn't even our fault. I always felt like my dad would take his frustrations out on us. We never got an apology. And that has always bugged me. And I think the reason why it has always bugged me is because not only would he not apologize when he would do things like that, and it turns out it wasn't our fault, he would make us apologize to him. Like, it was very clear that he was wrong. It was very, very clear. Like, he fucked up. He got the information wrong, or he misunderstood the situation, whatever the case is. And then he would be like, well, apologize to me. That shit is bizarre as fuck. The psychological part of it just has always fucked with my head because who does that? It's a big, like, power move. I refuse to be wrong, even though I know I'm wrong. I refuse to be wrong. So now you're going to apologize to me. That is insane. Not only did my dad doing this cause resentment towards him, it also closed off any open lines of communication between us, because who wants to talk to a person who can never admit that they're wrong, who wants to control all of the situations? Because at this point, you can kind of get a feel that my dad was a very controlling person. If he can't admit that he's wrong and he's making us apologize to him when he's wrong, right? So you can kind of get an idea of the dynamic in our house. Don't get me wrong. I know I'm saying all these things about my dad, but he's not a bad person. He has his flaws, and he has his own traumas as a child that he went through that caused him to behave the way he did with us. Now, I'm not excusing his behavior, but now as an adult, I do understand a little bit more about why he did the things he did. And the only thing that I can do now as a parent is try and break those cycles. I decided to do some research because I know my dad is not the only one that doesn't apologize. And this is what I found. I found that parents might do this because they feel it undermines their authority or makes them look weak or exposes their flaws, which would then lead to them losing respect from their children. Now, I can see why this might be a fear because parenting is hard, especially the older they get. the more they understand, and they begin to challenge your rules and your authority, right? We see it all the time, especially in the teenage years. Oh my God, the teenage years. They know everything. They know what's best for them, blah, blah, blah. They don't know shit. However, despite all these fears that you might have, it's still very important to apologize to your kids, because being able to admit that you're wrong is one of the foundations of trust building between a parent and a child. It fosters open communication and teaches them emotional intelligence. This is very, very true. Now, don't get me wrong, it can be challenging to admit that you're wrong, not just to your kids, but just in general. Your children usually see you as an authority figure or someone that knows what's best for them. Now, up to a certain age, mom and dad usually do know what's best for you, with the exception of those deadbeat parents that don't know shit. But once your child hits a certain age, they become more vocal about what they like, what they don't like, what they think what's best for them. You really do have to listen to your kids sometimes. Now, I'm not saying that you should let your kids do whatever they want. That's not what I'm saying, because, no. What I'm trying to explain is that, in my humble opinion, having the fear of your children undermining you and losing respect for you isn't a valid reason to not apologize to them when you are wrong. I found that apologizing to your child is a way of modeling responsible behavior and validating their feelings, which in turn helps them be able to develop healthy coping mechanisms and a stronger self-worth. Okay? So if you find yourself to be a parent that finds it hard to apologize to your child, keep this in mind. So after all these years, I finally decided to try and understand why this is something my dad would do. Now, for the sake of this podcast, you might think that I went ahead and had a conversation with my father and kind of got to the bottom of it. Well, I did not. And the reason for that is because I know my dad and I know myself, and having a conversation with him to try to get him to admit that he did something wrong is going to be damn near impossible, and that's going to piss me off. It's going to trigger me. We're going to get into an argument. We're just going to not do that. So I went on good old Google, and this is what I found. So it says here, there could be a desire to maintain a power dynamic, which totally tracks with my dad's personality. Just simply not wanting to admit they are wrong. Again, this tracks. Let's see, misunderstanding of the situation. That's also a possibility. Or a lack of awareness of their own action. This is said to be unhealthy parenting, as it can undermine trust and prevent the child from learning to effectively communicate and identify when someone is truly at fault. I 100% agree with this. I feel like I personally do find myself blaming myself for shit that isn't even really my fault. I mean, and why wouldn't I? As a kid, when something wasn't my fault, I had to make it my fault and I had to apologize. So, you guys, apologize to your kids. Now we're going to move on. Okay, the next popular response that I got was having bad communication, especially about sex. So a lot of people said that this is something that they want to change with their kid. So their parents did not have a good line of communication with them, especially about sex. Now, this is a good one because sex is a tough topic to talk about. For example, someone my age, 36, could have parents that were born in the 1950s or 1960s, right? So my mom was born in 1950 and my dad was born in 1960, actually. You know, they grew up in a different time and they grew up in a different country. Culture has a lot to do with this as well. It's not just when you were born, it's also where you were born and what is a cultural norm. So back in the day, a lot of people didn't really talk about sex with other adults, let alone with their children. And even at schools, what they would teach you was like the bare minimum, I think. So a lot of things have changed and is a lot more common now. How many times have you not heard people say, well, I don't know, that's just the way my parents did things, so that's how I do them? That's usually how it happens. If you come from a household that's not very open and you guys don't talk about a lot of things, and not just sex, but just a lot of things, and that's typically what you're going to do with your kids, and it goes on and on and on until somebody breaks the cycle, right? So now I'm going to be reading you guys a response that I got in regards to this. I'm not going to be sharing any names or anything, but here it is. Growing up, communication was not a strong suit for my mom, especially when we would have disagreements. I vividly remember her leaving the house and going to my aunt's house to literally run away from the arguments, and I would chase her into the garage and ask her to not leave. Homework would be stressful. I wouldn't understand certain concepts, and she would yell at the top of her lungs in frustration, get in the car, and leave again. Then when she would get home, it was like she just needed a little bit of time to regroup herself, and then things would go back to normal. So that very quickly became my norm. Along with not communicating effectively, sex was not a topic that was touched in my household. Hence why I got knocked up at 19. I only knew the very basics, which is what you would see on TV. I didn't know much about condoms, birth control. All I knew was abstain, abstain, abstain until marriage. That was a very clear rule, and I was just to abide by it. So conversations were not really needed, apparently. But I said no, we're not doing that. Explored on my own, did things that I shouldn't have done, and then found out that I was pregnant with my firstborn at the age of 19 at a Planned Parenthood clinic. Communication is something that I decided early on in parenting my son that was going to be very important. It was during that time that I was actually attending community college and I was taking psychology courses and learning about the different communication styles. I learned about passive, aggressive, assertive, and manipulative styles. And as we dove deeper into the communication styles, it was right around that time that I realized that what was actually my norm was not normal. I never tried to change anything or make communication better with my mom. When I was younger, I internalized my feelings quite a bit, but I always made a promise that when I had my son, I would be uncomfortably open and honest with him and all the boys. I look back and I am so thankful that I have created such a safe space for them to share their feelings and to communicate with me because they come to me for every little thing, even when it's awkward and uncomfortable. My boys know that they can come to their mama. I wanted to share this response because it hits a lot of good points about the importance of communication, not just about sex, but communication in general. It's very important to be able to talk through certain things with your kid, like your feelings and why you're feeling frustrated. It's important to talk about sex because, like this person shared, she got pregnant at a young age because of her lack of knowledge when it came to sex. I personally started having these talks with my son when he was about 13, 14, around the time that he was going to start high school. Because really, when you start high school, a lot of things change. And I know that nowadays, kids are doing things at a much younger age, but it's really important to be able to talk to your kids about these things. When I was growing up, we just got the you got to respect your body or nobody else will talk. The rest I kind of just learned at school. There was no in-depth talk about a lot of things. That kind of was a struggle. And also, I want to point out that on top of talking to your kids about just sex in general, it's not just about don't do it, you're going to get pregnant, this is how it happens, or you're going to get a disease if you don't do this, if you don't do that. Yes, that is very important. You got to go through the steps of everything. But also, I think it's very important to tell your kids about the emotional baggage that comes with having sex, especially at a young age. A young mind is not equipped to deal with all the emotional baggage that comes with that. Also, something that I made it very clear to my son when I started having these talks with him, which I think is very important, is you never do anything with anyone without their consent. You always need to have consent. I can only do so much. I can only tell my kids, hey, you shouldn't do this for this reason. You have to wait until you're older for this reason. But the truth is that our kids are going to do shit that we don't want them to do. And they're going to have sex whenever they want to do it, not when we want them to do it. So it's important to give them all the information and let them know that consent is very, very important. I do want to add one more thing to this whole open communication about sex with your children. And unfortunately, I have to say this, and I say it's unfortunate because it is. I personally think that it's really important, along with the sex talk, to let your kids know what is acceptable and what is not acceptable for an adult to do to them. Because there are way too many cases out there of children getting sexually abused by adults or older children. I unfortunately know way too many women who have a story about them being sexually abused as a child. I do know that this doesn't just happen to little girls. It unfortunately also happens to little boys. It's a sick world, you guys. People do sick things, and it's really important that you let your kids know what's acceptable and what is not. A lot of the times that this is happening to children, they know that it's not okay, but they're being threatened or whatever. But a lot of the times, they also don't know that what is being done to them is not okay. I remember being a little girl, and my dad would sit my sister and I down, and he would tell us from a very young age that no one was allowed to touch us no matter what. He would repeat this stuff all the time. we never really understood what he meant until we got a little older, because I remember we were pretty young and I remember thinking, like, why is he telling us this? Like, what does he mean? Like, of course nobody's allowed to touch us, you know? This has to be part of the talk, because there are kids that don't know that it's not okay. And then they end up with all this trauma. And sometimes the cycle just continues. So I know this is a very heavy topic. And honestly, I feel like this topic needs its own episode. And if you feel like this is something that you guys want to hear about, please go to our Instagram page at Defrosted Chicken and send me a message. Going through something like this as a child is most definitely going to affect how you parent your children. So I think that'll be a good topic to talk about, like I said. All right, friends. So just remember, it's okay to be uncomfortable from time to time. It's okay to have these conversations. That awkward feeling is not going to last very long, and it's better safe than sorry. It's better that your kids know that they can come to you, whether it's about sex, whether it's about somebody touching them inappropriately, or somebody's bullying them at school. Whatever the case is, you want to have an open line of communication with your kids. They need to be able to come to you and tell you what's going on in their lives before they go somewhere else and potentially get bad information. Okay, so we're going to move on from that. The next popular response that I got was substance abuse or excessive drinking. A lot of people said that they would not drink excessively or use drugs around their kids due to the traumatic experiences that they went through as children. What are some of those things? Violence towards them or the other parent. So it's pretty common that when you're under the influence, you become violent. Some people hurt their kids or their spouse, and obviously that's very traumatic. Another thing was that a lot of parents did that were under the influence was arguing with the other parent in front of them, causing fear. So this is pretty common. I feel like a lot of parents sometimes argue around their kids, whether they're abusing drugs or not. I think it's pretty common just because shit happens, you get mad, you blow up, and your kids are always around. I'm not saying it's okay, but I feel like most of us are guilty of this. The next one is drunk driving. This one obviously is fucking stupid. Like, don't ever get in a car if you're under the influence of anything and drive, especially with your kids in the car. There were way too many people that told me that their dads would drive drunk with them in the car. I was lucky enough to never have to experience that. My dad is not a big drinker. He is actually really annoying when he drinks. So I am glad that he very rarely drinks. But man, this is irresponsible. Like, you can kill yourself, your kids, or worse, kill somebody else and somebody else's kids. This next one is interesting, and I can actually relate to this one. Somebody said, bringing your child into your marital arguments. So one person told me that their dad would basically use them as a mediator between his arguments with the mom. And unfortunately, my sister and I can relate to this one. I remember as a kid, he would bring us out and make us pick a side. Who's wrong and who's right? Now, the person that sent this in also said that at times she had to be involved in conversations that were not always appropriate for her to be in. They were about things that, her young mind could not possibly comprehend. I personally don't have memories of any topics that my parents were actually arguing about. I just remember my dad telling my sister and I, like, to pick a side. Do you think that your mom is right, or do you think that I'm right? But I don't ever really remember what the subject was. I think one of the reasons that I don't remember what the arguments were about is because, well, I was too young. But also, my brain, my child brain, was not developed enough or mature enough to understand the complexities of an adult relationship. Now, my sister and I still talk about this here and there. Like, dude, do you remember when my dad would make us do this and that, right? And we kind of laugh at it. I mean, it's not funny, but what are we going to do? It's already happened. Like, we've moved on. We just talk about how, like, we would never put our kids in that situation. Another good one was not allowing your significant other to be the only one to punish the kids. This is the good old good cop, bad cop situation. I never liked that. Not only growing up, but as a parent. So growing up, my dad was always the one to punish us. I don't know if that's the way he wanted it because he was the head of the household, or that's just what he had to do because my mom wouldn't punish us. I don't know. But it definitely created a sense of resentment towards my dad and a sense of fear. We were always super scared to ask him anything, and we resented him. Now, as an adult, I don't think I still hold resentment towards him, but it definitely affected our relationship when we were kids. As adults now, we have a better relationship with him. So, one of the persons that sent in this response did mention that she grew up in a blended family, and the person in her household growing up that was doing the disciplining was actually her stepfather. So her mom allowed her husband to discipline her children. I do have some experience in this area because I am a step parent. Now, if you listen to episode 1, you hear me talk about how I've been raising my husband's son since he was 6. He is now about to be 18 in about 2 or 3 weeks, okay? And I'm his mom. He's my son. His biological mom is not around. We have a really good relationship. I don't refer to him as my stepson, even though technically he is, and he doesn't refer to me as his stepmom. However, I know that I'm not his biological mother. So when I started raising him at the age of 6, it was really tough for me to be the strict parent because I am the strict parent. I am a lot stricter than my husband is. And disciplining him was hard because I always had that fear that he would resent me or that he would one day be like, "You can't tell me what to do. You're not my mom," you know? But I mean, that has never happened. But nonetheless, there is that fear. I think I'm the stricter parent because I grew up in a strict household and that's just what I know. So that's how I was parented and that's how I parent. But honestly, my kids need to stop complaining because they get to do way more shit than I was allowed to do. My husband is a laid back parent, the cool, fun guy that lets the kids do a bunch of shit. I think just in general, he's a laid back guy. That's his personality. But also, he grew up in a Hispanic household and he was the oldest boy. If you grew up in a Hispanic household, then you know if you're a boy, you get to do whatever you want. If you're a girl, you don't get to do shit. Even if you're the oldest girl and you have a younger brother, your younger brother is going to get to do way more shit than you get to do. You don't get to do nothing. Definitely, we grew up differently. Our gender has a lot to do with it and our culture. Another popular response is hitting your child. So, this one could be considered controversial, guys. Now, I will say, like you guys heard me mention, I was hit as a kid, and I wasn't just kind of smacked here or there. Like, we used to get our asses beat. If you ask my dad now, he denies the whole thing. He never touched us. He never hit us. Like, we're crazy. We're making it all up. I don't know what the hell that's about. But he most definitely did whoop our asses. A lot of people are gentle parenting nowadays, and that's fine. Like, you can do whatever you want. I'm not saying that you should hit your kids, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't hit your kids. I'm saying do whatever the hell you want to do. I don't feel like I have significant trauma from getting my ass whooped. Maybe I do and I just don't see it, but like, I'm okay. It's not like I'm on a podcast talking about my childhood traumas or anything. All jokes aside, I will say this. I think that this new generation could benefit from a little ass whooping. Just a little one. I'm not promoting violence. I'm not allowed to do that. That's not what I'm saying. But just a little ass whooping could go a long way because shit's getting out of hand, okay? I remember I was a teenager and I don't quite remember why I was arguing with my mom, but I was arguing with my mom about something. And my mom very rarely hit us. She would like pull our hair here and there, our ear, a little smack here and there, but she never really like hit us like my dad did. But I remember one time I was being such a bitch to my mom and she slapped me right in the face. And I was like, and even though I was a teenager and I was super mad or whatever, I knew that I was out of line and that I deserved it. So I couldn't even be mad at her. So research does show that hitting your kids is negatively linked to child development. Even just a couple of spanks once or twice is predicted to subsequent increases in child behavior. So we're going to move on from my ass whoopings, and now we're going to talk about a different style of parenting, and that is gentle parenting. This is something that is a lot more common nowadays. A lot of parents are gentle parenting. If you don't know what that is, I'm going to go ahead and read this off to you. Gentle parenting is a parenting style that emphasizes empathy, respect, and connection with children. It's based on the idea that children can make good choices if they're given the tools and the support to do so. I was not gentle parented as a child. Obviously, you guys have heard the things that I've said. And now I'm going to go into some detail, give you guys some example of what exactly it means to gentle parent. So, gentle parenting is not just not hitting your kids and not yelling at your kids. Honestly, I never really looked into gentle parenting, but I always thought it just meant like you don't hit your kids and you don't yell at them. But there's obviously a lot more to that. All right, so as I'm doing the research online for gentle parenting, there was a bunch of stuff that came up. For the sake of time, I decided just to pick very basic things, and this is what you should say to your kids instead of. Instead of saying stop crying, what you should say is, I can see you feel sad. Instead of saying be quiet, what you should say is, can you ask me again using a quieter voice? Instead of saying you'll be okay, you should say how are you? And instead of saying no hitting, you should say please use gentle hands instead. So you can kind of get an idea of what gentle parenting is with those examples. Now, there is a lot more information out there. You can do your own research if you would like. For the sake of time, like I said, I picked very basic ones. Personally, I do not feel like this style of parenting is for me. Now, if this style of parenting is for you, that's great. Everyone has their own way to parent their children, and that's fine. I just don't feel like telling my kid to stop crying or you'll be okay, no hitting, is really going to have any like big detrimental effects on them. But I don't know. To each their own. Um, I would like to sit down and talk to someone who practices gentle parenting, like hardcore. I think that'll be a good episode just to kind of get an idea of how that looks. Send me a message on Instagram and let me know what you guys think, all right? At Defrosted Chicken. All right, guys, so I'm going to go ahead and close this episode out with a positive quote, like I like to do at the end of every episode. And for this week, it's going to be the sign of great parenting is not the child's behavior. The sign of great parenting is the parent's behavior. And this is by Andy Smithson. I picked this one because I felt like it was very fitting for this week's topic. I hope that you guys please keep in mind that the way you parent your kids is the way you parent your right? Don't compare yourself to other people because you're just going to go in circles forever. Everybody has their own way of doing things. I'm not here to tell you what's right and what's wrong. You know what's best for your child. Most of us do. So you do whatever you think is best. All we can do is try our best, you guys. With that being said, happy parenting, everyone. See you next time.